Welcome to Your Cyber Path, the podcast that helps you get your dream cybersecurity job by sharing the secrets of experienced hiring managers and top cybersecurity professionals with you. Now, on to the show.
Well, so let's take a moment and explore if least privilege is such a cool thing, then why doesn't everybody do it? And I think the answer to that is because it can be a hassle. It's going to cost you a little bit more to figure out what exactly does Kip need and not need. It's way faster and easier just to say, hey, Kip's the new guy. Let's just give him an account that's the same as Jason, because we know Jason can get to everything that Kip needs to get to, and we just sort of rationalize in our head, oh, Kip's a good guy. He won't go and look in the HR files. He won't go look at the financial forecasts, right? He'll stay in his lane, and everything will be great.
I don't trust Kip for that. No, not happening.
So I actually worked at an insurance company. I was the chief information security officer there for 7 years. One of the things that I found out as I was learning how we did business is that there was such a customer service orientation that everybody who had a business justification to be in the core processing system, which is to say the computer that ran all the policies, right? If you were able to get in there at all, you had access to everything. And that even included like glass shops where you had technicians who weren't even employees of our company, but they could get into our database and see everything. And I remember asking the director of customer service, I'm like, this really is making me tweak here, right? I'm getting tweaky just sitting here thinking about it. Why do you do this? And they said, well, we know it's a little bit of a risk, but we want to make sure that if any customer ever walks up to anybody that represents our company, if they want help, we want to make sure they can get it. We never want them to have the experience of, I'm sorry, sir, I'm sorry, ma'am, I can't help you because I just work on glass claims and you're asking me a question about something that doesn't have anything to do with glass. I'm sorry, here's the phone number. And they just never wanted anybody to experience that kind of friction. It was just built into the business model. And ultimately, I had to be okay with that. I had to realize that was just, the way that this company did business. They knew it was risky, but they were going to accept that risk because they knew over years of experience that the upside was that people loved them and people wouldn't take advantage of them. And there was more revenue to be earned by having that approach than there was losses to absorb by having that approach. So even though least privilege is a great idea, in no way are we suggesting that it's the only way you should do things, that you can't do things any other way, that there's never a good reason to do it. If you're going to work in cybersecurity, you've got to be savvy enough to see multiple shades of gray. If you walk around with one bit of color, everything's black or it's white, I don't think you're going to do really well. So
yeah, and this is one of the things I always go into in my security courses. And you and I just put out a new course called Security Essentials recently, and we talk about this in there too. But it's operations versus security, right? Mm-hmm. And there's always this challenge where the more security you add, most of the time you get less or lower operations. So as you said, if I say, hey, you can only look at glass claims, you can't look at body damage claims, more security. Right. But that means now I have to have two people, one that can do body claims and one that can do glass claims. And that's worse for my customer experience, right? And so it's lower operations. Conversely, there's a lot of other things we can do where we say, okay, we're going to give more operations by not using least privilege, but now we have much lower security. And so there's this change that happens, and it is a seesaw effect that a lot of times they are inversely proportional to each other. There are some things that do work both, but in most cases they don't. And we just see this tension between security and operations. And I can tell you, having been an IT and security guy for 20, 25 years, when I was working in a very operational environment, the operators hated it because they were like, wait, you want to take away our ability to do this, this, and this? I'm like, yeah, because those things are really, really dangerous. And there's some things we had to figure out what were the workarounds and what would we allow you to do that made sense for operations and come to a compromise. And if you're, like Kip said, if you're just black and white, like it's all security or all operations, you're never going to find a place that works for your company. And so you have to figure out where on that sliding scale can you bend on security to get more operations, and where can you give up some operations to get better security, where that trade-off has to happen.
What I loved about least privilege in that context, that scenario that I told you about, was that it gave me a vocabulary. It allowed me to even have the conversation about, hey, shouldn't these people have least privilege? Well, what's that mumbo jumbo, Kip? Oh, well, let me tell you what least privilege means. So let me tell you why it's, a good thing. And then they said, oh, okay, now we understand what you're saying. Okay, well, here's why we don't do it that way. So we were able to have a very productive conversation. And yeah, there's some tension, but I would call it a healthy tension rather than a destructive tension, right? Because you can have either one. You can have tension where you're fighting and you're ruining your working relationships with people, or you can have a healthy tension where you come together and you sort of challenge each other, but you're on the same team, right? So we have, we're working on the same problem here. We're just taking different perspectives to it. And I have found that I get a lot more respect from the operations people when I approach these issues with curiosity and an ability to actually talk about them using ordinary business language. That's another great thing about these security design principles.